The Kalb Report is funded by a grant from the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism Foundation. From the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., this is the Kalb Report with Marvin Kalb.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club and to another edition of the Kalb Report. I'm Marvin Kalb, and our subject tonight, why Murrow matters in the digital age. Or perhaps it should be, why Murrow still matters, especially in the digital age. CBS's Edward R. Murrow was an exceptional journalist. I think we all accept that. He was also a creative, innovative journalist, using the relatively new technology of his day, which was radio, to invent broadcast journalism, while at the same time covering World War II. Today's journalism lives in revolutionary times when people read CNN and watch the Wall Street Journal. The new technology of our day is transforming journalism, and for traditional newspapers and network to survive and even thrive in the digital age, they have to use the new technology in creative ways, much as Murrow did during World War II, all at the same time maintaining a very high level of journalistic performance. So, a few questions. How are they meeting the new challenges of the digital age? Where are they going to get the money? And are they maintaining a high standard of journalism? We've invited 4 journalists who, I hope, know the answers. To my left, Jon Sawyer, the founder and executive director of the Pulitzer Center. For 31 years, he was an award-winning reporter, foreign correspondent, and Washington bureau chief for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. To my right, Evan McMorris-Santoro, for the past 2 years, White House correspondent for BuzzFeed, a web-based news organization, and for 7 years before that, he covered politics for, among other outfits, TPM Media and The Hotline. Again, to my left, Sam Feist, Washington bureau chief and senior vice president at CNN, where he's worked for the past 25 years. He's a winner of 3 Emmy Awards. And to my right, Gabriella, who is deputy managing editor of the Wall Street Journal and editor of the journal's strategic initiatives. She's worked at the Journal for the last 24 years. Now, I expect the 4 of you to believe that the digital age has been a big plus for American journalism, and the American people today are much better off than they were during Murrow's day. Now, show me concretely, by example, how your work in your organization, using all of the tools of the digital age, has improved journalism and helped the American people. And I want to start with Jon Sawyer.
Thank you, Marvin. That's a nice question. I think my answer would be yes. I think it has improved it, with a caveat that the transition has been incredibly traumatizing for the journalists who lived through it. Many people have lost their jobs, and so I think we begin with that. We don't have the same kinds of authoritative lead news organizations that we had at the time of Edward R. Murrow and in the years since. On the other hand, I think that what has opened up is tremendous possibilities for us to do things in ways that we could not have imagined 20, 30, 40 years ago. And you take in our case, a small nonprofit news organization, and we raise money to give it out to journalists to do this work all over the world. Our niche is international reporting on underreported systemic issues. Our method of doing it is to collaborate with anybody we can. And so we work with almost all of the leading news organizations, print and broadcast, in the United States and increasingly beyond. So if you look at the last just the last week or two. I mean, yesterday in the New York Times Magazine, there was a long feature by Janine Interlandi on the empathy gap based on reporting in Hungary on the Roma and failure to integrate that community into the broader Hungarian.
So you gave money to this reporter?
We gave money to the reporter that enabled her to go out, and then she then placed it with the New York Times Magazine, huge platform, really important piece of reporting that would not have existed without us, but we were able to use that platform. And then yesterday and day before yesterday in Politico, we had a long piece on discrimination against the LGBT community in Russia. That's another platform. A week or so ago, we had a big piece on child labor in the gold mines of Indonesia and Philippines that Larry Price, a two-time Pulitzer Prize winner, has done. So we use the NewsHour platform. I mean, all told, we do 80, 100 projects a year. There are several hundred outlets. And in the meantime, we've taken those journalists and we've built partnerships with 25 or so universities around the country to go out and talk about the work, and to secondary schools, to aftermarket, hundreds of events. And all of that is being done for just a few $1 million a year, for the not much bigger than the price of my news bureau at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch for one paper 10 or 15 years ago. That's the kind of budget we had, and we didn't have anywhere near the reach of the Pulitzer Center. But because of what's made possible in the digital age, we now are able to reach a global audience and to work with many large platforms to address these issues that otherwise would not be done.
Okay, good. Sam, from the point of view of CNN, tell us ways in which, please use specific examples. Tell me how the digital age has helped journalism or hurt it.
So John's right. The transition to the digital age has been rocky for a number of reasons, and I think maybe we'll talk about it later. Some of that, in my mind, has to do with the reliability of the information that people around the world are getting and reading. But on balance, both from a news gathering perspective, going out and covering the news, and a news reading or receiving perspective, the democratization of the ability of people to get and receive news from all over the world, I mean, it has been a remarkable 10 to 20 years. So we'll use some examples of world crises right now. The technology that allows our reporters to go to Turkey, along the border with Syria, and cover an ISIS firefight with rebels with only a backpack full of gear, which includes a computer, a transmitter, and a camera, is just amazing. And the ability for journalists to travel around the world and to cover stories that they've never been able to cover in this way before, whether it be an international crisis that we see with ISIS and take a journalist to the battlefield, or to a domestic story like Ferguson, where a reporter is in the middle of an unexpected rally where you couldn't have a satellite truck, which is what you would have needed just a few years ago, to cover that story in real time. So now you have a reporter with a cell phone, or maybe he or she gets fancy with a camera and a cell phone transmitter, and there they are in the middle of a remarkable national event, bringing that into the living rooms or onto the mobile devices of millions of people. These tools are incredibly powerful. I mean, we're here talking about Edward R. Murrow, who was in London and became famous for reporting from over there or from a war zone. Well, that's what the technology is giving us the ability to do now, but doing it live and with video.
Thank you. Gabriella, your job, as I understand it, is to make sure the Wall Street Journal takes full advantage of the new technology. Specifically, using examples, help us understand how you do that.
Yeah, so the Wall Street Journal has a very robust, very large print product, and that is holding up nicely, knock on wood. But there's no question that our audience is transitioning, or has transitioned, to digital and increasingly mobile. So we are conveying our news in multiple ways. And I view this era as something actually of a golden age, not in terms of business model. That golden age was a couple decades ago when newspapers were turning away advertisers. So in terms of business models, it's not a great time. But in terms of journalism, as Sam said, we have multiple ways to tell a story. You can do it through interactive graphics, video, all sorts of social media, and then of course there's always print. But also for the audience, it's incredible. We can get our news on our mobile devices. We can get it on our desktop. We can get it in audio, podcast, video, broadcast. It's a great time for journalism. I don't think actually it's ever been better because of the multi-platform method. So,
Evan, you yourself are the classic example here, the reporter who's actually working for a website. And my question to you, starting, is, would it be any different? Would you be doing something differently if you were now working for the Times or the Post?
I don't know. I've never worked for the Times or the Post, but I have many friends who do, and I think that our job is essentially exactly the same. What BuzzFeed News is the news division of a giant media empire that is built in the digital age. It's a social media empire. We do TV, we do video, all sorts of stuff. So what we really are is just your classic media company, but built for the modern era. And we're in the reporting side of that. So I'm in the news division. I work like any other reporter. I have sources. I have stories I have to go do. I have to put a suit and tie on. I have to go out and work this, knock on doors and all that stuff.
Do you do television stuff as well?
I personally, I appear on TV, luckily like tonight, for example. But I'm a print reporter. That's where I came from. I was a newspaper guy at first, and then now I've worked in the digital age. And the job is essentially the same. What my editors want from me is the same. They want scoops. They want the story to be the most accurate version of the story. They want things that are appealing to my audience, and they want them relatively quickly. And it's the same as anywhere else in that regard. So for a reporter, this is the nice thing about the digital age as well. I get to talk to students sometimes about this stuff. And I think that all the tools of the trade that someone like Edward R. Murrow laid out there in terms of being a good journalist are the same tools that we use now. Everything is, I think, virtually the same. There are some different, nowadays there are some different pressures on you in terms of there are some social media, but you put your own personality out there more than you used to, things like that. But by and large, I feel like it's the same job as it ever was, and BuzzFeed is like that.
I want to talk to you in a bit about this idea of putting yourself out there, which sort of rubs me the wrong way, but I'll get to that in a second. My sense from some of the things that you've said and the others as well is that the craft of journalism, the business of journalism, is essentially the same.
Practice.
There's a story, you go out and get it, and you report it. So what's new? So the technology has really changed, and in a big way, and we're in this digital age, and we're in the midst of a communications revolution where clearly speed is the priority. And I'm sure for some in the digital age, speed is the top priority. So my question is, what effect, good or bad, has the introduction of speed as a driving element in journalism today had on the quality of the journalism that we're providing to the American people? We'll start with Gabriella.
Well, I actually don't think speed is a new imperative. There have always been wire services. For instance, at my company, we've always had, since the late 1800s, the Dow Jones Newswires, and there's the Associated Press and many others. Those reporters have always had to be fast. And the real quality news organizations have always said, first accuracy, then speed. But you have to be fast, and actually there are some people who are just brilliant at being accurate and fast and have done so for decades and decades. And similarly, CNN and other broadcast organizations have been fast. Radio has been fast. There are more outlets and more means for being fast, but I think that the age-old, check your facts first, then get it out there, that still stands. And to make the news organizations that have ethics and standards and training, they're the ones who are going to make the fewest mistakes. And the ones who are just letting their reporters go out there without some level of editorial vetting, they're the ones who are going to err and give our industry a bad name.
So that is that is an illustration of speed, with some people, not all, obviously, having a negative effect.
But it's always been that way. If it's a quality news organization.
So that speed is
I don't think it's that new.
Competition among journalists is nothing new, and the race to be first with accurate information has been the goal for a long time. I think there was a newspaper once that had Dewey defeating Truman, and that was obviously a big mistake. But clearly, a newspaper was trying to get out there first, and they were wrong. I think in the media environment that we live in now, I think trusted sources of news are more important than ever because there's such a cacophony of sources. And so if you get burned very often as a consumer of news, hopefully you will begin to question that source that source of news who has burned you. Ronald Reagan used to say, "Trust but verify." I think that's more true now as a news consumer than ever.
Are we saying that speed has had no effect whatever on journalism as practiced today?
Clearly it's had an effect, but I agree with Gabby and Sam. I don't think speed is the main problem here. In my view, I mean, we don't do speed. We do underreported stories, and we've had great success at placing them in large outlets and getting attention.
But your outfit doesn't depend on speed.
No, we don't. But I think that where I do think there is an issue, and I think there's a major challenge, and it has to do with the collapse of the old business model and the tremendous constraints that every news organization is currently under in terms of the resources they have to deploy to reporting. What happens is that you get a concentration on the story of the moment, and everyone is doing that story. And it might be Ferguson one week, it might be ISIS one week, it might be Hillary Clinton's emails another week, and the rest of the world tends to get drowned out, and everybody's chasing that same story, and that's a problem, because you don't get a sense of what is truly happening around the world. There are lots of things that go completely uncovered, which is why when we go around because that's not our mandate. We're looking by definition for underreported stories. That it's so easy to place because people are just not covering so many of these stories. There's so much of the world that's not being covered. BuzzFeed is beginning to come back, and because BuzzFeed has the financial resources, they're finding it that you're beginning to put resources into it.
Yeah, we have great farm bureaus and great farm reporters. I have to argue a bit about this speed appraisal. One thing that happens now, especially in the political press, I was a campaign reporter in 2012, campaign reporter in 2008. Big difference in 2012 was Twitter was just the driving force. And the problem with the speed of something like Twitter is your editor is happy with you if you get that quote on Twitter before the other guys do. That's still winning the race. That's still winning the scoop. But the problem is there's no context in that. And narratives get set very quickly, and storylines get set very quickly that politicians have to react to, the news industry has to react to. They have to sort of react to this world that is a context-free, completely totally wrong. It's just a Chinese snippet that gets thrown up very fast. So I think that the speed issue, I agree, has always been part of journalism. I mean, when I had a weekly paper, my first job, I had to be out before the other weekly paper. I had 4 days. It was a long time. But and now I have 4 minutes. But the thing is, but the issue is now, I feel like the pacing on the campaign trail specifically may do some disservice. BuzzFeed is actually. People think that we're kind of a place that operates at a very high rate of speed, but the reality is we do kind of slow down a lot, especially lately with some of the reporting that we're doing, and try to sort of build out a story and give you more of what the whole story is.
What are you going to do next year? You think you're going to slow down or go faster?
I mean, I don't know. Some stories call for speeding up. Some stories call for slowing down. But I do think that we should really pay attention to this idea of this speed issue and think a lot about what impact it's going to have on the coverage that we give to people, because someone will see something on Twitter at 9 o'clock in the morning, and by 5 o'clock, every campaign's had to respond to it, every reporter's had to write about it, and then you go back and oh, that's not what happened at all.
But isn't that the real issue, Evan, that is discoverability and finding the audience? This is what BuzzFeed has been extraordinarily talented at, is sort of presenting a story in a way that it goes viral, it gets out into social media, and then that drives the narrative for everybody else. And that's not a speed issue. That's a question of how do you frame a story in a way that it gets picked up.
It could be a platform issue too. I mean, we're getting to a world of smaller and smaller platforms, right? I mean, now we're switching off even from television news to this idea of Meerkat, which is a new application for cell phones. Essentially, it lets you stream your own live video anywhere you are with a cell phone signal. And the idea with this is we're going to be able to have now these TV shows, TV interviews that pop up all over the place live. You got to click on them right away. But that gives you a little bit of a longer platform than Twitter, which has been the driving force in political journalism lately. And Twitter's 140 characters. So you can try to be as accurate as you want, but you can even do a thing where you tweet 3 or 4 times with that one tweet that gets out.
No, but Evan, I'm being told by reporters, those are my sources, that reporters are now being encouraged not just to get the story and to get it as fast as possible, and that has always been the case, but also to engage the audience, and you were hinting at this a while ago, to tweet out tidbits, to share personal attitudes. I think, from my point of view, that it's enough that a reporter just gets the story and gets it right. But that's not enough. You have to tweet, you have to answer questions on Facebook, and you have to help your corporation with what is called audience engagement. Now, what the heck is that all about?
Well, it's a lot of hashtag links that I put up, pictures of my cat, my wife's cat.
Are you being serious now?
That seems. I do post pictures of my cat on Twitter. It seems to help.
Yeah, now hang on.
We
Go
all
ahead,
do
Gabriella.
that. That's for personal stuff. We all love cats.
No, we're talking about the business of journalism.
This is a two-sided coin, in my opinion. On the one hand, it is true that I think that journalists now are their own sort of personal brand. They can move from place to place, which is nice. It's portable. It makes your career portable. You can go from place to place. People follow you because they follow you on social media. But
they're following you, not the news.
Well, they're following me because they like the news that I produce. I think that the
news that
stories
you
have
produce.
to be good.
Is that different from the news that Jon produces?
It might be.
Depends.
It depends. If he has fans because they like the style of the news or the subject of the news that he covers, maybe you have a reporter who is covering Republican presidential candidates, and I'm interested in politics, and I'm going to follow a reporter who's covering Republican presidential candidates, or I might even follow a reporter who's covering a presidential candidate. Maybe I'm a Rand Paul fan, and I really want to know everything that's happening out there with Rand Paul, and there's a reporter who's covering all of Rand Paul. Sometimes I'm going to see that reporter's stories. That reporter may not file every day, but that reporter will be traveling around with a candidate, tweeting or adding little bits and morsels on Facebook. And it's still information. It's still journalism.
Well,
it's just a different
it's
kind of
tricky.
journalism.
It's very tricky. Look, if you come to my Twitter account or my Facebook account, you will see pictures of our cats. Sure. And you will see stories from the Wall Street Journal and from other news organizations. But what you won't see, unless I slip up, are my opinions. Because I'm not an opinion, I'm not on the opinion side of the Wall Street Journal, I'm not a columnist, and I'm extremely careful not to let slip how I really feel about an issue, because for the longevity of my career, knock on wood, I want to be seen as somebody who's very balanced and fair and who sees all sides and reports all sides. So it is a really tricky situation now where probably too many reporters are letting their personal opinions show in their social media accounts. And some of them, it's appropriate for some of them because that is who they are, and they're presented by their organizations as people whose opinions will be presented to the world. But if they are putting themselves forward as objective journalists, they have to be extremely careful, and the news organizations have to train them.
But there are ways to sort of get at that personal engagement without going the route of strong political opinions. And the New York Times has got a really interesting new phone app, which I think is New York Times Now. I think it's if you go on that, and they're doing things like, these are the favorite thing we've read by a collection by various writers at the time. And it won't be a Time story. It'll link out to the Atlantic or Vice or someplace else. But it'll be A.O. Scott, the film critic, saying, this is a piece this is my favorite thing I read today. And the idea is to get you as a reader because you like A.O. Scott's film criticism, you'll go to the site and you'll get a personal connection with him or her, the various writers at the Times, and you'll feel that you're part of that community, that you know them.
Why is it important for the viewer or the listener or the reader to feel part of a community? What is the importance of the consumer of news feeling he knows the newsman. Who cares?
Ask Ed Murrow.
Right.
Ed Murrow, the people that watched Ed Murrow for all those years, they felt like they knew Ed Murrow.
Yeah,
They
and
knew
Cron-
him
and
because
Cronkite?
of the news.
Also knew him because
no,
of his
no.
style.
They
Yes.
knew him when he was interviewing Marilyn Monroe in her house, or
No,
or
that
Burt
came
Reynolds.
later, John.
But it went on for all through the 1950s.
That came later.
But his
No, no,
style.
but his
No,
style,
believe me,
his
it
style.
came later.
But we're saying his style was very personal and involved. You had a sense of who he was.
So you could have listened to Ed Murrow from London, and he could have said, today, this many bombs dropped in London. Today, Winston Churchill said this, and today, this army moved. But he didn't do that. He put context in it. It was fascinating. It was fun. It was entertaining. It was different than anybody else. It wasn't just the news.
It was different because he was inventing it.
Why was he more successful, more famous than any other reporter?
Because he was
in
better
Europe?
at it.
He
He worked harder at it.
But he didn't just
He
do
talked
the
to
news.
more people.
He didn't
He
just
covered
state
the war.
He didn't just state facts. He gave perspective. Not
Wait
he
a minute,
wasn't
wait a minute,
biased.
wait a minute. Perspective and facts? He gave the facts as he saw them, yeah.
As he saw them.
Yes.
As he saw them.
Exactly, as he saw them because he was covering a story.
Right, with an awful lot of context.
Yes,
But
but context is not opinion.
How is it
Who
different?
said who?
You're the one who's suggesting.
Right, right. My point is that you can engage your audience. Your audience can find you interesting and fascinating without
Well, I mean,
you
if
being
you strip,
an
they
opinion
find you
journalist.
interesting also. That has nothing to do
I
with
don't know
anything.
if that's necessarily true. I don't think the audience would like that at all.
But haven't news organizations, whether broadcast, print, whatever, haven't we always wanted to foster a feeling of community among our audiences? When you were still in active broadcasting, people came to you on Sundays for Meet the Press. People, when you were reporting when you were reporting on Kissinger and so on, people felt comfortable seeing you night after night. At the Wall Street Journal, we want our readers, our audiences to come back, to feel they're part of something that's reliable and quality. Our editor-in-chief does a daily email newsletter. We want our audience to feel that they're getting something of value, that's meaningful, and that they're part of a global discussion. I think that's really a good thing.
I want very much to continue that, but I want to take a minute now to remind our radio, television, and web audiences that this is the Kalb Report. I'm Marvin Kalb, and I'm discussing journalism in the digital age with Jon Sawyer of the Pulitzer Center, Sam Feist of CNN, Gabriella Stern of the Wall Street Journal, and Evan McMorris-Santoro of BuzzFeed. Let's pick up this idea about what I did. I'd rather get me out of this. What I'm interested in is what is happening now to news. What I'm getting at now was alluded to earlier, and I think by you, Gabriella. But there was an old rule of thumb in American journalism that the first thing you do is gather the information. Then you sort it out, and the editors come in that process, and producers if you're with television. And only then do you give it out to the people, to the consumer. Now, it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong here, that there's a lot of gathering of the news. We're missing a lot of the editing. And you jump directly to presenting it to the public, in part, John, forgive me, because of speed and the determination to get it out as fast as you possibly can. And then you have people using Twitter who will amp up this mechanism. You've got to do it not only fast, but somehow put yourself into it. And what I would like to know from you, Mr. Evan, because you're with BuzzFeed, are you obliged to, or are you encouraged to sell yourself to the public in addition to the news you are imparting? And I'm assuming that the latter is imparted objectively, straightforwardly. Where do you come into it? Where are you part of the selling packaging?
Well, like I said before, my job is this job as any other reporter. I come to work in the morning, gather news, put it together.
Got it.
We don't have any mandates or anything at BuzzFeed that say that we have to tweet or we have to be on certain social media or we have to participate. but I think there is a certain expectation from audience actually now too. I mean, if you meet a reporter who's not on Twitter, people will be sort of confused by that. I mean, this is a new world of reporting, and there is a way to do it that is not harmful and can actually add to the conversation. I mean, we talked about Ferguson earlier. Ferguson's one of those events where people who are on the ground, who were tweeting from it and writing and posting pictures and posting videos, were driving an amazing story that may not have been reported as well because it takes time for cameras to get down places and people to get set up. Just today, actually, Ted Cruz announced his presidential campaign, and there were reporters in the building who were able to use a certain social media outlet that students at colleges use now. That is it's a proximity-based geographical social media program, right? And people were able to watch in real time what students in the audience of Ted Cruz's speech were saying about him and saying about his speech, and it added a whole sort of new layer to how this kind of thing works. So I mean, it's all pretty valuable.
Let me interrupt. Were all of these additional pieces of information or opinion about what it is that the senator said?
No, I think they were great context. For example, this speech that he gave was a mandatory speech that every student at the school had to attend it, right? So you see this big, so viewers on TV in an era before this social outlet is available, they tune on the TV and they see a huge crowd of people, young people screaming and yelling for a presidential candidate. But if you were able to you can get context using this, it's called Yik Yak, but using this social media outlet.
Yik Yak.
That's what it's called.
You're on Yik Yak, right?
Yeah. But using this outlet, using this tool, you're able to tell your viewers or your readers far more about what was happening in that event, which is actually there were a lot of unhappy students who had to be there. It looks like anything else. Like, it's a screen full of people writing stuff. So there's a lot of pictures of, a lot of emoticons and whatnot.
Look, I think the thing about social media is it is another avenue to help people discover your news. If you just post stories or videos or interactive graphics on your website and you expect people to come to you, you're going to die. Because today, people find news in different ways through multiple social media platforms, through search, let's not forget about search, through email newsletters, and yes, they might come to your mobile app or your desktop website or app. So I think that it's smart to have your journalists tweeting and doing Facebook and LinkedIn and so on, because it's a way of broadcasting your news. The tricky thing for a news organization like the Wall Street Journal, where we have a paywall, we ask our subscribers to pay us for news because we need to survive, is we really have to teach our reporters how to appropriately put the news out. So if a reporter is at a news event or has dug up a scoop, we don't want that person tweeting out the scoop before it's been given to our paying readers, our paying subscribers. So we've had to teach them how to appropriately use social media. We don't want to scoop our own subscribers.
Marvin, you asked about editors, about whether we skip editors and go straight to the public. And I think that most mainstream media organizations follow the same rules that we followed 10, 20, 30 years ago. You get a scoop.
Why are so many people being fired?
Then if you make a mistake, you shouldn't. I mean, our rules are simple. If you have a scoop, if you have a story, you need multiple sources, and you go to your editor and you discuss it. And once the editor is comfortable, we may ask for more sources from you or other reporters, or if the editor's comfortable, it then becomes reportable. And at that point, we decide, is it going to be on television? Is it going to be online, on mobile? And eventually, once it's reportable, we will then put it out in social media, hopefully all at the same time, so that we don't scoop ourselves, exactly as you said at the Wall Street Journal.
But let me interrupt.
But the function of the reporter and the editor's role is exactly the same as it was when I started at CNN 25 years ago.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's good. And I wish that were true with all other news organizations. And by the way, when you have a piece at the White House,
Yeah.
does it go through an editor before you go on the air?
Oh yeah, it goes through. I'm a digital. I'm a print reporter, so it goes on the internet.
Okay.
But oh yeah, I mean several layers. We have editors in New York back at the home base. We have I have a bureau chief here. We have a big newsroom. So yeah, that process is exactly the same.
Okay, good.
And I think this is one of the things that separates so-called news organizations that proliferate out on the web and elsewhere, and serious news organizations, because there's a lot of bad information out there, and much of it's not edited, and much of it doesn't have any journalistic standards at all.
Now,
If you had a
all-
scoop, hang on just one second. If you had a scoop, Gabriella was talking about a scoop a minute ago. If you had a scoop at CNN, where would you place it? On CNN television or CNN.com?
I'll give you an example of a recent example. Our justice reporter learned the name of the new Attorney General nominee before anybody else had it. So he had it from multiple sources, checked with his editors, and it was now reportable, meaning we were comfortable with the sourcing and with the news. But what do you do next? At that point, we wrote a story for CNN.com. We did not put it on television for a few minutes. We wrote a story up for CNN.com. We wrote a tweet, a breaking news alert, all of the things that would come along with that story. And we let CNN television know that in just a few minutes, we would have this breaking news that only CNN had. And at exactly the same time, that reporter went on to CNN television. The story released on CNN.com and on Twitter and on Facebook.
So
and
it was the
breaking
same
news.
time?
Same time, so that we didn't scoop ourselves on one platform or another. The news was the news. It was a good old-fashioned scoop.
Okay.
That went on TV and online.
How
at the
much
same
time in the course of your working day do you spend on sort of traditional news that you put on television or news that you put on .com?
So we don't think of it that way. News is news, and we don't think about it as this bucket of .com news and this bucket of news for television. I mean, CNN has several networks. We have international networks that air different things.
But I am told, Sam, that in any number of news organizations, including the New York Times and the Washington Post, not represented here tonight, and I'm sorry about that, but they make a very clear effort now, not even 2 years ago, but now, to get the story on the .com first, because that gets it out everywhere. Very fast.
Depending on what the story is.
In other words, it's more important at the Times to get it on .com New York Times than to get it on the front page of the New York Times the following day.
I understand, and I would say, at CNN, I would say at CNN it's the same.
Undoubtedly, why would you want to wait till 9 hours later till it came out in a print
It's
paper?
one thing,
Because
Marvin, to
that-
hold for 5 minutes, as I described in my example, and another thing to hold for several hours. What if we're in the middle of a taped program? We won't hold the news. We'll go ahead and put the news out on .com.
Look,
That's correct.
So-called legacy news organizations that have a print presence or have a broadcast, a robust broadcast presence, all of us realize that our audiences really want the coverage digitally as soon as it's ready. They don't particularly need to pick up the paper in the morning and see something that they didn't know the night before. Perhaps they want more context in the print story, but really they're like all of us. They're addicted to their mobile phones, and they want to know it when we can give it to them.
Gabriella, does that mean, John?
Just on that point, I was going to say that broadcast is headed the same way that print has been headed for the last 10 or 15 years. So that, I don't know whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but the cable, the idea of cable news outlets and profits coming from that, it's just not going to exist.
Well, that's
we're all going to be on the web, and that's where we're going to
And has
sink
it
or
happened
swim
now?
on
What
the
I'm trying
web.
to get, I think, from the two of you first, have we already tipped over
Well,
toward the digital,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
older stuff is passé?
You can't say that's not important. My company.
Important for revenue
Right now, from a
for print.
business perspective, the television side of CNN is still a much larger share of the revenue. But from a news perspective,
You've tipped.
It's safe to say as many people get their news from CNN, CNN.com, CNN on their mobile device as they do from television. But you use them differently. I mean, you use your mobile device differently than you use your television screen. You wouldn't watch a documentary on your mobile device, at least not on a telephone in most cases. But headlines might be more appropriate on a mobile device than to be sprinkled on television.
John, supposing you don't have a mobile device and something important has happened. These days, how do you find out about whether something is important?
Yeah, but Mark, I think with the Economist thing in last week, the week before, that by 2020, is it 3 billion of the world's population? It's 3 or 4 billion. We are at that point. I mean, most of the world is going to have smartphones like the caliber of the Apples or the Androids that we're carrying around in our pockets here. Most of the world is going to have that in the next, not 30 years, but next 5 or 6 years. And that's where they're going to get their information. And the world is going to be interconnected in a way that it's never been interconnected before. And most people are going to be thrilled to death that they have that
And we can
opportunity.
assume that the people in Africa and most of Asia and most of South America are also going to have
They're
all
already
of the...
using it. I mean,
No, I'm sure people are using it, but you're making it seem as if more than half of the people are going to have that device.
Yeah,
and
they
use it.
will. That's absolutely the case. That's fact. That's where we're headed.
So that my point is that we've already gone beyond what was, and we're in the new world now, and it is the digital age. And I get back to asking a question that sits within me, and I need an answer to it. And the answer is that if we are now in the digital age, and I take your word for it, that's it. I've lost. You've won.
Oh, no.
Hang on a second. Hang on. I want to know in what way, if at all, in your judgment, that shift to the digital age has improved the quality of our politics, the quality of our democracy, the way in which we govern ourselves. Journalism has a very important role to play in our democracy. And I am asking you, in what way? You gave us an illustration before, Evan, the way in which, with Twitter and with everything else, the coverage is now almost determined by the way in which Twitter gives a spin to a certain story. Before the debate was even finished, the last debates in the last presidential campaign, because of Twitter, news organizations determined their front page stories on the basis of Twitter, rather than listen to the entire debate and then make up your mind where your lead is. So where are we? How is it helping us?
Well, one big way that's helping us, and I think the biggest way, is diversity. We have so many more outlets now. The barrier to get into to get your stuff published is easier now. I mean, I think you need good editors and all that, everything we've been discussing. But we're talking about so many things now in this country, talking about racial issues, issues of gender, issues of class, because people that couldn't get onto the New York Times front page can get onto the front page of BuzzFeed, or if not BuzzFeed, Huffington Post. Not Huffington Post, something else. Like the digital era has unlocked a whole new group of a whole new world of reporting, really, that we hadn't had before, and I think it's all positive in that way. The country's much better off having people empowered to speak about what they want to speak about, and to know that there's somewhere they can actually get their news that's appealing to their lives onto into the public space, and that's much easier now than it was when there was 2 big papers and 3 networks.
Marvin, we've had, I don't know, 6,000 or 8,000 pieces of content in the last few years from the Pulitzer Center on a pittance, on just a tiny amount of dollars that's gone out around the world, been on all these different news outlets. And then, one of my colleagues who's here tonight is translating, a number of our work and working with translators in China. So we have Chinese versions that are going out on Weibo, on the Chinese Twitter, and they're reaching tens of thousands of Chinese, and that's being done, just part-time in a small office that's reaching large numbers of people and bringing them information they wouldn't otherwise have, and that's happening all over the place.
Now,
And
wait a
we do-
minute. Happening all over the place, I want to...
Different organizations trying new things and sort of taking advantage of these opportunities that are there and trying in a multitude of different ways to engage with and find an audience. And I think, I disagree with your point about the engaging with an audience. I do think that we have to engage.
What is the disagreement on?
Well, you were saying that why wouldn't Edward Murrow would never have thought about having to engage or sort of reach out to engage, and I think he did, but I think all of us certainly
But I
have
think
to
we're
do that.
talking, John, about two things. One, when he did it, and we can go into the Murrow thing after the program.
Right.
But my
But we have to
question
find out,
here,
we have to
no,
find
my
the audience where
question,
they are.
you haven't answered
Right.
my question, though. I want to know in what way, since you're all so enthusiastic about the digital age, I want to know, because I'm enthusiastic about American democracy, and I want to know how the digital age is helping my children or grandchildren grow up in a better place. I want to know how this digital age has come up at the exact same time as there has been a polarization in our politics. Is that coincidence? I don't think so. I think one feeds into the other. And I think it's something that we have to talk about, be conscious of, be aware of. What is happening now with journalism affects our lives directly. It's not just journalism.
You don't think Joe McCarthy was accomplished at being able to create the same kind of polarization 60 years
Yes,
ago?
and look what happened to him.
Yeah, I think the same. Just let there be debate.
When
and
will the
discussion.
polarization stop, if that's the implication of what you're
Well, I
saying?
think we've had polarization for a long time, and I think there's always the opportunities are ripe for demagogues. And,
Yeah, I
and
think the polarization.
You don't see that there's anything
I don't-
special now?
I don't think there's a special connection to the digital age. I don't believe that's causing it.
I see, okay.
I think it's cultural.
Tell me about it.
It's just this country. It's mostly about the culture, about diverging views on how to live a good life, what is moral, what isn't. It reflects demographic changes in this country. I think it would be very interesting for somebody to try to establish if there is a correlation between the evolution of the digital media age and polarization in U.S. politics. There is one adverse effect that the digital transition has had, which is the death of wonderful metropolitan papers. And that has had an impact on democracy, whether local, statewide, or national. I a long time ago worked for the Rocky Mountain News, may it rest in peace. And the Rocky is just one of many papers that are no longer. And that is simply because the traditional business model no longer worked. We lost them, and in some communities, digital upstarts have replaced these metro newspapers, but in many places, there is no substitute, there's no replacement.
National and international coverage, I think, has only been enhanced in the digital age. Local state house coverage, local court coverage, city hall coverage has taken a really big hit. But national and international, I think it may be, as you said, the golden age. Mm-hmm. There are more people covering more stories, more writers, more reporters, more outlets, more television outlets here and around the world than I think there have ever been. And that's a good thing.
Oh, I wouldn't argue against that at all. I think that certainly is a good thing, and it's one of the positives of the digital age. Absolutely. More people are involved, more people are getting information. That is all a plus. I'm trying to establish, and maybe this has to be, we have to bring in several graduate students now and do some PhD work on a link, a possible link, between the emergence of the digital age and the emergence, in my view, not John's, of a special polarization in our politics, which is very harmful, in my judgment, to the way in which we govern ourselves. But you raised a moment ago, Gabriella, the way in which newspapers, with the rise of the digital age, have been put out of business, because we're all searching for some sustainable model, an economic financial model that's going to work. Now, the Wall Street Journal, have you found that model? Are you comfortable with it? Are you making enough money for your boss to do what he wishes to do? I mean, what do you think?
I hope our boss is happy. So at the Wall Street Journal, we have a couple different kinds of revenue. We have advertising revenue, print advertising and digital advertising. But we also have subscription revenue, print subscription revenue, and digital. And we were really smart. In the 1990s, when we created WSJ.com, when we debuted, we charged for news. We debuted with a subscription model. And all sorts of competitors laughed at us. And they all launched their .coms for free. And we reaped lots and lots of subscription revenues from WSJ.com over the years. And then, of course, a few years ago, everybody started going to the paywall model. It's called a paywall. There's a wall, and you have to leap over the wall and access our news. You have to pay. And so you see there are many different kinds of paywall models, and we have one, and there's the New York Times has another.
What makes more money, the paywall that has to do with the .com or the paywall that has to do with the printed newspaper?
Well, so every news organization has a different balance. But the transition is going from print to online. Increasingly, our readers would prefer to have their news online than in print. Our print product has held up really well, so it's still a huge part of our
10 years
revenue.
from now, do you imagine you're a big newspaper reader and you love it and you've worked for papers? Are you going to have a printed edition of the Wall Street Journal?
I mean, I believe print is here to stay. It will probably shrink. It'll be a smaller part of the average reader's reading habit, but it'll be there because it's a very handy way to digest the news. If you go online or you look at your mobile app, you have so many options. It can be very overwhelming. The beauty of a print product is you have 50 pages or 20 pages of what the editors think you should know that day. So it's handy, but print will decline. There's no question about it.
BuzzFeed, tell me, where do you get your money?
Well, I'll answer that question, but I wanted to just really briefly defend against the idea of internet reporters being responsible for the decline of American democracy. I think in the era of changing campaign finance laws and complete rethinking of how political advertising works and professionalized political messaging campaigns from all over the place, I think those are maybe more the perpetrators of where the polarization comes from
you're not saying it plays,
than the poor online digital reporter. I mean, I wish I had that kind of power. I don't think that I do.
You're not saying it plays no role. You're saying it plays a role with other forces.
I really don't think that the digital age much to do with it. But
so wait a minute, I don't have a lot of time now.
But
give
on
me
the
a
money
quick
thing,
answer. Where do you get your money?
We have advertising. We're advertising based, like everybody else. We have a smarter way of doing it than some other online places.
We are, unfortunately, quickly running out of time here, but let me give each of you about 30 seconds now to tell the students in our audience here at the National Press Club why they should aspire to a career in journalism rather than one in dentistry. I mean, and I'd like to start with Evan, you first, because you're deep into it now.
Well, as I was saying earlier, I think that this is an amazing time to be a reporter. There are so many stories that are out there, and there are so many readers to find those stories. BuzzFeed as a company, essentially, what they're really good at is connecting people to information. So if you're a reporter working at BuzzFeed right now, and you write a story, my editors and our business side can get that story into the hands of the people who would want to read it very well. Like, they're very good at that. And that's a really powerful thing for a reporter.
How many people are reading BuzzFeed?
Oh, huge numbers.
Huge numbers.
Really, really big.
Tens of millions.
Well,
Come on.
The quote that we're given a lot is that it's half of Americans between 18 and 29 every month.
Not bad.
So it's a lot.
Not bad. Gabriella.
So journalism is the most fun career you can have, and you can make a difference. You can travel widely. You can report on things that people don't know about, the plights of people all around the world who are suffering. You can write about fun things. You can dig up fabulous scoops, and you can ask any questions you want. It's a wonderful career. It's the best.
Terrific. Sam?
It's a front row seat on history. but it's unbelievably important. Our government doesn't function. No government really could function well, but our government doesn't function without successful journalism and media business, whether it's uncovering mistakes that the Veterans Administration makes and then holding them accountable, or it's providing a platform for political candidates to debate. It's incredibly important. It's absolutely essential, and yeah, it is fun.
John.
It's a license to ask anyone anything that you want. It's an opportunity to learn and master any subject that you choose, and it is an opportunity to make a profound difference in the lives of all of us.
So you'd be a journalist, huh?
Absolutely, I'd do it again. And also I'd do it because of the people that we've seen, the people that we've worked with, the journalists the hundreds of journalists we've worked with over the past 10 years, the just extraordinary careers and opportunities they've had and what we've learned from them. And yes, these are difficult times. It's not as easy. You're not going to be like me and work 31 years for one organization or like Sam or Gabby, but you are going to be have the opportunity to do amazing things.
I think Edward Murrow would be happy with what he sees.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. I hope so.
Certainly tonight he would be. This is good. This is good.
Anyway, our time's up. And as I tried saying before, for me, the role of the media, the free press is central to maintaining a free and open society. And that's why I think this technological revolution that we're all experiencing is so terribly important to journalism, and I think we've heard a good run-through on that this evening, and also to our democracy, and let's hope that they both continue to flourish. I want now to thank our audience, and I want to thank our panelists for sharing their time and their insights with us. We are all the beneficiaries of your work. But that's it for now, and I'm Marvin Kalb, and as Ed Murrow used to say many, many years ago, good night and good luck. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Now, what we're going to do is have you all ask questions, if you'd like. There's a microphone over here, right? And there's a microphone right over there. So if you have questions, just walk over, and you will have an opportunity to ask any question that you would like, so long as it's more or less a question. And identify yourself, too, please. That would be very helpful. Why don't you start right there?
Hi, I'm Amanda Ottaway. Full disclosure, I work at the Pulitzer Center with Jon and Marvin. Should I hold this, or do you want to hold it? Okay. So I work in the education department, which means I see kids interacting with journalism every day. Not every day, but a lot of days. And what I sense from kind of adults is that there's a generation of kids right now who are morally bankrupt, more or less, because they take selfies and they go on BuzzFeed. And I respectfully disagree with that. You know, I think that they are very interested to hear in the stories of other people around the world. And the thing is that they have so many options to choose from, right? Like we were talking about that. They create their own news experience. And that's fascinating, and it's also terrifying. And so thinking about the future of our democracy, I just would be interested to hear from you guys to what extent your news organizations think about that, and think about the fact that people are choosing CNN over BuzzFeed, for example, or the Wall Street Journal over, so.
Thank you very, very much. Good question. Do you want to address that to anyone in particular? No, already seated. Sam, I'm electing you. Answer.
Listen, I think that people get their news in different ways. Millennials behave differently than their parents and grandparents, and that's okay. You can get your news from CNN television program. You can get your news from a story written on CNN.com that you're reading on your mobile device. You can get it in your Facebook feed by something that a friend or a family member of yours shared that was a CNN video or a CNN story or a BuzzFeed video or a BuzzFeed story. It's still information. It's still journalism. And we need to connect with our audiences, and we need to go and find them where they are. And that's something that's unique to journalism in the 21st century, is that we don't have to wait for our audiences to come to us and flip on a television at 6:30 p.m. and then be informed. We can also find them and get information into their hands even when they were least expecting it, which is a good thing.
What was so wrong with people coming at 6:30?
Nothing wrong at all. But you can do this also.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Ariana. I'm a journalism student at GW. I'm wondering, in terms of online news sources, with new web analytics programs, you have access to more data that you can possibly imagine, who's on your website for how long, at what time, and so much more. So what do you think the danger is between this blurred line between marketing and journalism, and balancing between quality journalism and publishing something so that it can get more clicks?
Okay, Gabriella, you want to try that?
Yeah, so as you said, newsrooms have access to incredible amounts of data. We know how many people are looking at a given story at any given time. So you could just decide, we're just going to chase clicks. But the problem with that is you destroy your brand. So you have to be true to who you are. If you're the Wall Street Journal, you are, which, I could get into our spiel, but once if you know who you are and what you mean to your readers, then you're not going to be tainted, or the data isn't going to lead you down the wrong road. So that's my advice: is know who you are, stay true to your identity, and then use the data accordingly.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Oh, sure. I'm Holly Joseph. I'm just interested in this subject, but I just wondered if I didn't hear anyone say that this digital age enables many more people to be journalists, to get out information than ever before. But at the same time, I kind of wonder what is being taught differently in journalism schools these days.
I'm not sure I understood that. John, do you want to try that?
Well, I think the question, she's suggesting that it does enable more and more people to do journalism, and there's citizen journalism, various forms of it. And I'm not sure about how it's taught differently, except that journalism schools are now emphasizing that you have to work in multiple platforms, and people are learning those skills that they didn't have before. One of the reasons that, for us, Amanda was speaking about the work that we do in outreach in schools, is to get a sense of what it is that people, how they perceive the world and what they're interested in. And that's been a really important part of our model. It's about a quarter to a third of our resources and staff time, and we do like 500 events a year at schools and universities. And we have learned so much from that about what resonates and what types of stories, how you present stories. And that feeds back into the quality of the journalism that we do, and we think it's really important.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Hannah. I'm a Washington semester student in the New Media program at American University. And a few of you touched a little bit on how it's a benefit to have an influx of reporters, citizen journalists, that we have more reporters than we've ever had. I just kind of have, as a student studying journalism, what advice can you give the students studying currently about the competition with more journalists, and especially, through social media, more people that are engaging in news? What can you advise for the competitiveness of journalist students?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Evan?
It's fierce. It's definitely very fierce right now, because there is a lot of, especially on the political space, there's a lot of dogs chasing one bone, right? Like the stories stay essentially the same, but there's a lot of people on them. The nice thing, though, about social media and Twitter and things like that when you become a reporter is the herd mentality is like now very you can see what it is. You can watch the herd literally, galloping past you, and you just got to wait for a second and then just go that way. And I think that I've personally found myself being successful with that, and I think that's something that is a benefit of this, what I think is overall kind of dangerous, rapid narrative building that comes out of Twitter. If you can see it happening, you can go the other way. So I think the best thing to do is to know that the story that you want to chase, that you think is the good story, is what you should stick with, and not let everybody else, because it's going to be a lot of pressure around you, because everybody's going one way and you want to go the other way. keep zagging when they're zigging, and that's the best way to succeed.
It's a hard thing to ask of any young reporter.
It's hard for anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Casey Mendoza. I'm also a Washington semester student. This question is for everyone, except maybe Evan. The subject the subject of native advertising was brought up briefly, and I wanted to know everyone's thoughts, what everyone's thoughts were on this sort of intersection of news content and advertising.
Sam, why don't you try that? Not everyone, just you.
So there's the wall of church and state between the reporters in my news organization is very much there. They write a story, they're not concerned about the advertising, they don't know anything about the advertising, and they are completely insulated from the advertising, the business side or the advertising side of the organization, as it should be. So in 25 years, I've never had a manager or an executive say, you can't, we can't do a story about, we can't do that story because they're an advertiser. It's just never happened. It's never, and no one can imagine that it would happen.
It happened at CBS. It happened at CBS in the tobacco industry. Oh, yeah. So it does happen. It's a good question.
But it
does happen. It should
shouldn't
absolutely
happen.
done.
Right. If it happens, it's a mistake.
It is, yeah, and acknowledges such. Yes, please.
I'm Lauren Meyer, a senior at the George Washington University studying journalism. And my question to you as a journalism student who is trying my very best to enter this highly competitive industry come graduation, as seasoned journalists, what do you all believe is next? We've seen the digital era, which we're obviously currently in now. What is next for journalism?
John?
I'm not sure that I see beyond the digital era. I mean, I'm sure there is some next beyond that. I think that what is next is really what's past, and that's content. I mean, I think that I am a deep, deep believer in the power of original, strong content, and I think as long as all of us hew to that and work on doing the best reporting that we can to surface new information and present it in the appropriate context and tell it in compelling ways, we'll be fine. And it won't matter whether it's we're working on plasma screens or we're just sending things from my eye to your eye, whatever whatever comes next. I mean, as long as somebody has to be the storyteller, and somebody has to go out and be able to gather the information, and that will always have power.
That's exactly right. I mean, gone are the days when you could get a job because you knew a social media platform that your editors thought was completely magic. We are back to the era now where it's professionalizing again. Good reporting and good content is what they want. So be good.
We gave, the National Press Foundation gave the prize for best congressional reporting this year to BuzzFeed for like a 10,000 word piece that Greg Johnson wrote on the 65 or 70 word authorization to use military force after 9/11, which has governed everything that's happened since. And he did this magnificent job of reconstructing how that thing came to be and how Obama campaigned against it and then enforced it once he was in power. And he just told you what had happened in the last dozen or so years, and beautifully written. And I'm not, there's a lot about BuzzFeed, the presentation, that it's not really my cup of tea. I'm getting used to it. I'm sort of adjusting to figuring it out, but it's not something that I'm consuming day to day. And I was amazed to come across this story because it was up against the Times and the Journal and the Post and the really great reporting. But that was the one that won the prize this year. It was really, really good.
Evan, is that a staff person who won that prize?
Yes, the staff reporter.
He
came out of our fellowship program.
For the long articles that appear on BuzzFeed, are all of them from staff writers?
Generally, yeah. I mean, I'd say the mix is probably the same. New York Times sometimes will go to somebody, a stringer. Yeah. We don't do that much of that. We do have some personal essay stuff that gets written, sort of op-eds. Some of those come from outside, but by and large, it's staff. I mean, we hire some staff.
Do you pay the outside writer?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How much? Yes, please.
Better than
Hi.
most.
My name is Melissa, and I'm a journalism student at the University of Maryland. And I have a question about kind of the aggregation. So I'm sure that you know, like sites like Facebook and Google have algorithms that direct people to things that they're liked in the past. And so I'm wondering if that you think that it has any impact on polarization of news and like the consumption of news.
Okay. Sam?
I think it does, and I think that's one of the sides of the digital landscape that's not necessarily good for our democracy, because I think that if you're only exposed to one side, whether it's on cable news or it's in your Facebook feed, or you choose to only look at conservative websites for your news, I think you're missing out on an awful lot of news, and you get tunnel vision, and that can lead to polarization. So to a small or medium extent, I think the algorithms that you're talking about can contribute to it. Yeah.
Hooray, we have an acknowledgement of something.
Yeah.
Hooray, yep. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Tina. I am a Washington semester student in journalism, and I was wondering, so recently we've seen China be more or less successful with its Great Firewall, and what do you think that digital media means for a system like China in being able to limit and constrict the flow of information and the type of information?
Oh, well, I mean, that's a really good question. And we saw over the weekend, I think Reuters.com got shut down in China. WSJ.com has been shut down for the better part of a year. Bloomberg's been down. New York Times has been down. And probably many other news organizations have been down. So there's a real issue with freedom of the press in China. And it doesn't seem to be getting better. It seems to be getting worse. And it goes beyond press. It's bloggers and all sorts of people have been arrested in the last couple of years since Xi Jinping took over. It's a serious, serious issue and quite concerning.
Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Klett. I'm a broadcast journalism and marketing major, actually, at the University of Maryland. And for a couple of months now, I've really been thinking about and really been considering the journalism model. As a marketing major, I see that it's not only the journalism business structure that's flattening. I mean, all across the business world and corporate America, we see a flattening of these organizations where employees are being empowered in leadership and in teamwork, and they're given more responsibility. And I believe we can say the same thing is happening with reporters. We have less people working on a story, and yet more power and more authority is being given to the reporter to go out and see what the story is and to write the story. And if you have a camera, give a perspective. What are you going to show visually the viewer? And in thinking about this and in thinking about how the business model could change for the better, I actually had the privilege to talk to two reporters from CNN, Tom Foreman and
I'd appreciate
Bill
a
Ware.
question, please.
Yes. Well, it's how do we take that responsibility and that leadership that reporters have been given and that packaging, and how do we take that and we create that news that comes from all over? How do we create content? Because my generation loves people. We love people's stories. How can we bring that into the news?
Thank you very much. John.
You didn't, when we went around, you were asking how do you make money, how do you do what you do? I mean, I think this sort of speaks to where we are on the spectrum, that for the Pulitzer Center, I mean, we're very much in the school that a lot of this kind of work is public good. It's not commercially viable. And so we're dependent on foundations, on individuals who see the importance of the public good to have these things covered. And I think that's particularly the case for international reporting for these global systemic issues that otherwise don't get covered, because they're not ratings in it, there's not high circulation in it, there's not money to be made off advertising. And so it requires people to invest in it.
We've got time, I think, for one more question, which is right here.
I'll keep it brief. My name is Stephanie Abbs. I'm a graduate student in journalism from the University of Missouri. I couldn't help but notice the demographics of this panel. And I was just wondering if any of you in your organizations felt like, the supposed democratization of media on the internet was pressuring the organization to incorporate more diverse views.
BuzzFeed has a very active policy in trying to diversify our newsroom and expand it demographically. The numbers are still pretty bad and we're a little bit better than most. But this requires an active interest by people who run the media to make these kind of changes happen, and hopefully we're seeing that happen. And I think that more pressure is coming because of social media and audiences that are demanding it. So I think that there is a light at the end of the tunnel with this, but it is a very slow process, and I think it's not fast enough at all.
But it's amazing. From my perspective, it has been very fast, but we have a different sense of time here.
Yeah.
But I remember, no, seriously, I remember when every major slot at CBS was a man. There's no question about it. And it really began to change in the 70s. And it began to change for the reason that you're now mentioning, that there was somebody up above who said, we're going to do it differently. And he began to hire women. And lo and behold, they could cover the news also. And it was one of these things where he hired some very good women, and that helped an enormous amount. In other words, it wasn't just hiring a woman, it was hiring a terrific reporter who happened to be a woman. And then what I have found was somewhere in the 80s into the 90s, things kind of leveled off. But apparently, is that the case at the Wall Street Journal, do you think?
We have lots of women in the newsroom, not enough journalists of color, something we're working on. On the women issue, we have plenty of women. The challenge is that once they get into the child-raising years, the challenge is to keep them in the workforce. I'm a big believer that you can have it all. You can have a great career, and you can be a great mom. Part of it is you need to find a partner who will share the burden with you and not expect you to both have a great career and do all the child-rearing and housework. I happen to have a wonderful partner who is a full-time dad, but you don't even need to have that. You just need to find a person who will let you be who you want to be as a journalist, so you stay in the workforce. We lose too many women who are steaming ahead career-wise in their 20s, get into their 30s, and for whatever reason, they feel they have to step back. They don't necessarily leave the workforce, but their career, ramps down a bit, and so they lose that momentum. So I do believe you can keep it going. You should just find the right person who will support you in your personal life.
Well, do you find that a woman, say, in her 40s into her 50s would come back into journalism?
It's tricky. I mean, if you leave, or if you just sort of slow it down, other people speed ahead.
Right.
You can catch up, but
Sure.
it's just trickier.
We're wrapping up now because we've run out of time, and I feel that, Evan, you have had your final moment. Gabriella has, but Sam and Jon ought to be able to say something that wraps it up and rises to an element of philosophy and brilliance and integrity.
I mean, this conversation, how can you not be optimistic about journalism after listening to this?
Well, listening to you, I am.
Then we've been successful. I think it was an evening where the four of us needed to help convince you that things are not so bad.
No, I don't want you to think that I think things are that bad. I see people being fired. I see an awful lot of reporters, I am told, I talk to them, they're my friends, and they tell me sad stories about what is happening in the newsroom. And I know one woman who works at a major network who is simply overwhelmed now because of the demands of the digital part of her job. When all she had to do was to worry about nightly news, that was not a big deal. That was a great job. But now it's the Today Show, and it's Morning Joe, and it's this during the day. She has to get NBC.com. And what she told me in a recent conversation, I don't have a chance to call anyone anymore. I'm too busy broadcasting. That is what worries me.
I agree. That's an issue. And I don't know who that person is, but obviously they need some more help over there. But there are opportunities everywhere. People are getting their news in ways that they never could get it before. People all over the world who don't have televisions, who don't have access to the Wall Street Journal, who don't have the money to pay for a newspaper, can get it on these devices that they have, or get it in an internet cafe. I mean, it's remarkable. It's amazing.
I
and
think
that's something to be hopeful for.
Absolutely, and if that actually is what is happening
it is
in the underdeveloped parts of the world today, great. That is not my gut feeling, but I could be dead wrong. John, your final thought.
Well, Marvin, I would say we've had this discussion, but Marvin comes to the Pulitzer Center almost every day. And as I tell Marvin, what you just described, those stresses, that's not what you observe at the Pulitzer Center.
I do not.
You do not. That's not the
Not
way
at
we
all.
operate. We don't have a tweet count at the top.
Not at all.
We're not requiring everybody who works with us.
Pulitzer Center is hitting a home
run. We go
run.
deep and long. But my more important point is that unlike anybody else on the panel and most people in the room, I have, and all of my colleagues have, the incredible privilege of getting to be with Marvin every day. And how could you not be optimistic about American journalism if you every day were inspired by somebody like Marvin Kalb?
You're all wonderful. Anyway, good night and good luck, everybody. Terrific.